Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. We'll continue our discussion on shared memory, and today we are going to make it a little more dynamic. What that means is that so far we were looking at shared memory, which was uh, expected to be fixed at compile time, which means that we cannot give arbitrary size to the arrays that we declare. And therefore, if we are unsure how much memory we are going to require for a particular application, then we have to be conservative and give larger size which can accommodate as much memory is available on shared memory. So there is another way which is called as dynamic shared memory, using which we'll be able to specify um, different sizes which we can give to the arrays that we declare or the variables that we define in the kernels. And it turns out that it's not as simple as we have in C language. I mean, it's not difficult either, but it's just that it's a different syntax. And therefore, I thought that I'll mention this. Okay, so the dynamic shared memory is required when you don't know at compile time while you are writing the program, for example, how much memory is going to be required, right? And that is going to be specified as a third parameter to the kernel launch, right? So it seems a little odd that you need to specify it in the kernel launch rather than inside the kernel. Also, this might turn out to be a surprise that there is a third parameter of the kernel launch, but that is what is specified. To add to that, I must mention that there are actually 4 parameters which you can give to the kernel launch. And fourth parameter also is something which we are going to study later in this course that's going to be related to streams. So let's look at the syntax. The syntax is relatively simple, but just that we should know. Din shared is a kernel to which I'm launching one thread block with n threads. And then the total amount of dynamic shared memory that I require for the kernel to execute successfully is specified in terms of number of bytes using, let's say, some expression which evaluates to an unsigned integer. N into size of int is what I have given, where n is coming from the input. So n is not known at compile time, and therefore this turns out to be a dynamic shared memory requirement. How do I define it inside the kernel or declare it inside the kernel? I have the specification very similar to the static shared memory, but apart from that, I need to specify extern. This is just a mnemonic which CUDA has suggested so that the compiler knows that this is some memory which is coming from dynamic shared memory, which is being defined inside the host function rather than the kernel call. Also, the size which we used to specify is now empty, and therefore the kernel comes to know that this is what it is going to be. Right. So this is required primarily for arrays. For all other purposes, we don't really get into. I mean, if you have a few scalars, then those anyway have fixed memory location and fixed memory sizes. The rest of the code remains the same. So there is no change with respect to whether we are using static memory or dynamic memory inside the executable statements. And that turns out to be reasonable. So can somebody tell me what is the output of this code? Okay. Venkat says even number, odd numbers. Any other suggestions? Jumbled order if greater than 32. No. I'll tell you, Rigved, why I'm saying.
Sir, because of sync threads, that order will be fixed, right?
Uh, no. I'll tell you why I'm saying so. Odd numbers until n or n minus 1. Okay. Yeah, that depends upon the whether n is even or not, correct?
Sir, the sync threads does not ensure that like I am thinking on Rigved's point, like it should be jumbled. Like the sync threads won't ensure that the printf will be in order, right?
That
I
is
mean, at
correct.
least
Yeah.
that's not the reason for the ordering, right?
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to get into the discussion. Aditya also has a question. So let me answer Aditya's question first. So Aditya, this is more like a syntax which is specified, which we need to specify, which is enforced by CUDA if we are using dynamic shared memory. So when the compiler is compiling the kernel, it needs to know what is the size of that shared memory. And only when you specify extern, it knows that, okay, the size is somewhere coming from the kernel launch. So that is the way we need to specify that. Otherwise, it will assume, without extern, it will just assume that it is static shared memory, and therefore it needs to specify the size. So note that we have not specified the size of S here. Right? Therefore, so there needs to be some way of telling the compiler that this is dynamic shared memory. And instead of devising a new keyword, they thought that we can specify using extern, and that suffices for our purpose. Sheera is saying didn't understand the so the third parameter, the third parameter is the size of the shared memory that you require per thread block. Right. So the way we would have specified it in the static shared memory earlier, that amount of memory we have to specify, that this per thread block, that we have to specify as the third parameter. So Rigved says if we use S of 10 instead of S, will it allocate 10 bytes or n bytes? I haven't tried that. Might be worth trying. But my feeling is that compiler might be able to give a warning that you already have declared it as extern, so you cannot specify the size, most probably. Warning or error. If n equal to 5 and extern is 10, what would happen? Yeah, that's what, it's not, I would imagine that the compiler should give a warning or error. Anyway, this is something which you should not be doing. Anyway, this is just to check how the compiler behaves. So this is not a valid use case, but anyway, you can just try it out. But yeah, I don't know the answer. What if we need two dynamic shared memory? How do you do the kernel launch? So that's a good point. Yeah, I'll come to that. If it exceeds maximum shared memory size, yes, so that is possible. And in such cases, there is since there is no error check that is happening at runtime, because you are specifying this value of n at runtime, and therefore you might not be able to catch that error. You might not be able to catch that error at runtime, and therefore your program might misbehave if it goes beyond the 48 KB shared memory size that you might get. So for the static case, the compiler was making some checks because it knew the amount of memory that you require. So if it goes beyond 48 KB, or let's say 32 KB if you have prefer equal, or 16 KB if you say prefer L1, etc., then the compiler can give an error. But in this case, the programmer is taking the responsibility of specifying that I am going to tell how much memory you should allocate. And that memory, then compiler will not be able to check at all, because this is not coming, this is not known at compile time. N is coming at runtime, and therefore there won't be any check, and you might get some bad behavior at runtime. So it's programmer's responsibility to make sure that the n is within bounds. Correct. So we have two concerns that we have to worry about. One is Vignesh's question, and another is Rigved's suggestion. So let's come to first Vignesh's question. If there are two dynamic shared memory, you can specify those one after the other as many as you require, but their total size needs to be specified as part of this kernel launch, right? So how does it get no, sorry, not this way. Okay, this question had come up last time, and I think I don't have a slide, but we had a discussion on that. If I recall correctly, I'll confirm this on Moodle. But if I recall correctly, you can have one array, like in this case, int s of, like in this case, the way we have specified. And then if you require multiple such elements, then you specify, let's say, int star x1, which is pointing to ampersand of s of 0, and int star x2, which is pointing to, let's say, s of some blah, which is probably going to be later. So all the shared memory is going to be given to this s, and then you specify which part is going to be first array and which part is going to be the second array. That is what I recall, but I'll confirm this on Moodle. Yeah, I should have had that example on the slide itself, but sorry about that. I'll add that example, not a problem. But that is what I recall, that we have to give that memory is going to get allocated to the same array, and then you are going to specify those pointers which are pointing to different array locations. Why didn't we pass n as an argument and declare shared int s of n? I think that is okay. So that is not something which is supported in CUDA, that you can have a shared dynamic shared memory in that manner. Right? So if you want dynamic shared memory, then you have to give it as a parameter via the kernel launch. Right? So that is the issue. Okay. So let's come back to this discussion of will odd numbers be jumbled if n greater than 32? So that seems to be correct, that odd numbers will be jumbled if if n is greater than 32. What happens if n is less than equal to 32 is what we want to discuss. If n is less than equal to 32, right, that means that this is executing as a single warp, and this statement is going to be executed by all the threads in that warp, of course. Right. So, okay, let me put it this way, that let's think about when n is arbitrary, let's say n is 1000 or 1024, whatever. So there is shared memory which is going to get allocated because of this kernel launch. Then s of thread idx.x is going to happen. This is shared memory, so we should not be using global ID, we should be using local ID, which is thread idx.x, which we are using correctly. After that, there is a barrier, and that is going to make sure that all the threads in that thread block, all the 1024 threads, are going to finish execution of assignment of this thread idx.x to s, and then only this conditional check is going to be executed by all the threads. Odd number threads are going to find this true, and they are going to execute this printf, and that is where we had the discussion that odd number threads are going to print, the order is going to be immaterial, and therefore they are going to print it in some order. Now if there is a single warp, this sync threads is actually not required because they are anyway in the SIMD processing. However, yeah, and after that all the warp threads are going to execute this condition, and then odd numbered threads in our Ravana, odd numbered heads are going to, let's say, watch a movie, whereas even numbered heads are going to close their eyes. So odd numbered threads are going to execute this printf. In which order? That is not guaranteed. Right? And therefore, even if there is a warp, single warp, even if the number of threads or n is less than equal to 32, still the printfs might be jumbled. Right? It so happens, and in many cases it so happens that you might actually see the output in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 order. That might be because of a specific implementation on your GPU, that the printfs from warp threads are combined in the sequential order. But there is no guarantee. There is no such statement from CUDA programming guide which says that the printfs within a warp are always going to be sequential. So you might see that effect, but there is no official documentation on it. Right? So therefore, we should be careful about it. Any other? Yeah.
Sir, I didn't get the point about two dynamic shared memory. Like, can you give an example?
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying is that, okay, let me put it this way. So we have, let's say I want, like in this case, S is the shared variable. I want S1 and S2 to be two shared variables, right? First array, I want it to be of size n. Another array, I want it to be size 2n, right? So therefore, I require 3n size. So the way I'm going to launch the kernel is, let's say, going to be 1, comma n, 3 into n into size of int, let's say. So this is how my kernel launch is going to be, because I require n sized array and then 2n sized array. Now all of this is going to be given to the S that I have. Now if I want those two arrays, what I'll do is that I'll say int star S1 is equal to S, int star S2 is equal to S plus. So this is how I'll declare two arrays, S1 and S2, which are pointing to the same shared memory location, right, which is again dynamic, but I'll point them to appropriate location and then start using it. Right? So this is definitely one way in which this will work, but I'll confirm if there is any other way. Most probably not, but yeah, this is what I recall from last year's system.
Sir, so we can only declare one shared array.
Yeah, that is what I recall, but I'll confirm.
Okay, sir.
There is a question that if that's the case for multiple arrays, then they must be of the same type. Not necessarily, not necessarily. So you can have, for example, the second array to be of type char star, and then use it as a character array. So since this is just allocation of bytes, you can specify any type, and then you can have a, so then in this case, for example, if the first one is int star and second one is char star, I can say char star S2 equal to char star of plus n. I think this should work. So S plus, since S is int star type, plus n is going to be using the integer type, and then I typecast it to char star, and then whenever I use S2 of 0, S2 of 1, I'm going to use different bytes of S starting from nth location. So that means we can only have one extern shared variable field. Again, I'll confirm this, but that is what I recall.
Sir, so if we want any arbitrary kind of data structures in the shared memory, how do we go about it?
Yeah, so then we'll get into very similar to how we do with malloc, which means that we can typecast it to this particular type using, so let's say struct node star S2 equal to, then struct node star of that, and then we start using it, very similar to how we do it.
Sir, so when we are launching, we'll just do n into size of whatever is the data structure.
Yes, yes, correct.
Okay.
In fact, if you have these multiple arrays, in this case, we took the example of only integer as two arrays, the first example. Otherwise, we will have to see, let's say, n into size of int plus n into size of node. Like that, we can give a complete expression as the third argument of the kernel launch, and we can specify that.
Sir, but is it like, don't we have some sort of padding inside data structures which we create on our own using struct for alignment?
Okay. Does the padding come into picture? Yeah, I have not seen padding to be coming into picture here.
Because when we're doing with C and then the compiler definitely does the padding, right?
Yeah. So on CPU I have seen the padding. I have not seen this padding happening on the GPU, which probably is going to make our life simple. But yeah, what if there is a padding? Yeah, I am not sure if there is padding. I have not seen any place where padding comes into play. So most probably that doesn't happen. But once we have an answer to this, most probably we'll have some more discussion onto this on
Okay.
Moodle.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. What is the use case of dynamic shared memory against static one? For example, what benefit do we miss here if the memory was static? So sometimes the amount of memory that you require in the dynamic case could be small enough that small enough in the sense it's small, but you are not sure how much it is, right? So it's not probably 48 KB, right? And in such cases, you don't want to allocate memory, which is input dependent, but you are kind of sure that it is not never going to go beyond 48 KB. So if you use static memory, then you are going to always allocate something which is conservatively larger. Whereas in this case, you can specify a lower size and therefore keep larger space for L1. So whatever is the remaining one, you can utilize it for L1. I mean, the hardware can utilize it for L1, which might improve a little bit on your locality. Right? Any other concerns here?
Sir, if we are creating a extern shared int type data type, and is it possible to use it for float by typecasting?
Yes, it is possible.
Then
So
in that case, it would be taking two two okay two in, space of two in data types, right?
oh,
Is
you
it?
are saying, okay, maybe double you want to, or maybe integer is 16 bytes is what you are thinking. Okay, so I was thinking that int and float take 4 bytes, but yes, we can take the example of int and double, let's say, where double is 8 bytes. In which case,
Okay.
can you typecast it to double? Yes, you can. And will it create a problem? Yes, it will create a problem. In fact, if you are lucky, it will create a problem. Otherwise, it might just take the garbage of the last 4 bytes and it might just give you some answer.
Okay, sir.
Do we use any method to free the dynamic memory that is created here like we do in C++ by using free method? No. This dynamic memory, shared memory cannot be freed. But there is a dynamic memory allocation on GPU using, you can actually use malloc on GPU. It's not, I mean, it's given as more like a flexibility to the programmers if you want to create dynamic data structures onto the GPU. And there you can free the memory using free method. So there is malloc and free on the GPU, which you can use arbitrarily. However, the performance of malloc has not been very uh, well, in the sense that the malloc has not been very well optimized on the GPU. And there has been some research works to improve that memory allocation. So if you have large number of mallocs, which many threads are doing, then it's recommended that you use CUDA malloc from the GPU and then use that memory into the kernel. If you are using malloc sparingly in the kernels or device functions, then that's okay, that you can use for your let's say initial population of linked list, etc., that you can use malloc. But yeah, there is malloc and free. Shouvick, CUDA free is for CUDA malloc, so that happens on the CPU side.
Sir, but when we're doing malloc, it will be on the GPU RAM, right? The
Yes,
heap for the particular.
yes, that is correct.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, this is very similar to what you do with CUDA malloc. By the way, it's managed a little separately, but yeah, this is, you can view this as a separate heap memory, which is again part of the RAM of the GPU, which is being done totally from the GPU side. So now it's your responsibility of the kernel code to kind of make sure that, because this malloc memory is going to stay across kernel calls. right? Similar to CUDA malloc, you have kernel 1, kernel 2, kernel 3. If you do a CUDA malloc memory, that you can use in kernel 1 also. Even if kernel 1 finishes, that memory is still available for kernel 2 as long as you pass the pointer to it. Similarly, CUDA malloc from kernel 1 is also possible to be accessed in kernel 2 and kernel 3 as long as you have not freed it in between. Any other concerns? All right. So let's move ahead from here. Okay. So this is one interesting aspect which comes up when we are dealing with shared memory specifically. For this, we need to understand a little bit organization of this shared memory. And this is again a performance related aspect. If you don't worry about performance, you don't have to worry about this bank conflict. This is very similar to your thread divergence and memory coalescing. Right? So these are performance related aspects which we are studying as part of this course, which will help you in improving the performance as much as possible of your codes. So shared memory is organized into something called as banks of, let's say, chunks of memory. Each bank contains some number of words. And it so happens that the way the technology of banks is, if multiple accesses to the same bank happen, then those are sequentially served. Right? So the banks contain the data. The threads or the cores are making requests to the banks, and the memory is going to get retrieved from the banks or getting returned to the banks. So if these accesses, reads and writes, are to the same bank, then those are sequential. If these are to different banks at the same time, then those can be nicely parallel. Right? So the consecutive words, it so happens that the way, as soon as I declare an array of, let's say, 100 integers, the consecutive words, although they have consecutive addresses, right? So let's say 1000, then 1004, 1008, and so on. Like these are the addresses of those words, but those get stored automatically in different banks. That means that when threads are accessing A of 0, A of 1, A of 2, A of 3 in a nicely coalesced manner, that actually is parallel with respect to the banks. And therefore, we say that there is no conflict with respect to coalesced memory access because these are going to different banks. However, so there is one exception that otherwise there is a conflict, which means that from two threads, if you start accessing the same banks, that is the words from the same bank, then there is a bank conflict. Right? And that bank conflict is going to get served in a sequential manner, and therefore there is a performance penalty. So we should be careful. One small exception to this is that if the warp threads are accessing the same bank, right? If the warp threads are accessing the same bank, but they are accessing different words in the same bank, then there is a bank conflict. But if they are accessing the same word, sorry, did I say it correctly? If the warp threads are accessing different words from the same bank, then there is a bank conflict. If the warp threads are accessing exactly the same word, then that gets served immediately. I mean, that is not sequentialized, that's a single access to the bank, and that gets served to all the warp threads. So therefore, this is just a small exception, but other than that, you should view that if there are multiple words being accessed from the same bank, then there is a bank conflict. Right? That also means that if there are multiple warps which are accessing the same word from the same bank, right? So if there are multiple warps which are accessing the same word from the same bank, then also there is a bank conflict. Right? Only the within warp, if there is a same word access, then only the bank conflict doesn't occur. Right? Any questions on this basic part? There is a question. Can we access dynamic shared memory called into one kernel from another kernel? Okay, so let me go back and ask this question, that can we access the static shared memory called into, I mean, defined into one kernel from the another kernel? Yes, okay. It is malloc, then yes. No, we never did a malloc here, right? So malloc is for the global memory. Malloc is not for the shared memory. Okay, so it so happens that if you are inside a kernel, the scope of the shared memory is limited to that kernel. And therefore, whether it is static or dynamic, it will get freed at the end of the kernel. So you will not have it accessible across kernels. Is banks an abstraction or physically present in you? It is not an abstraction. It's actually the hardware organization of memory. So this is a very important concept which comes up, especially when you have small number crunching operations and very nicely data parallel access. Then this bank conflict suddenly comes into picture. If you have a very let's say synchronization heavy code, which means that there is a lot of data dependence, then that synchronization becomes the bottleneck. Even if you have bank conflict, it just affects performance a little bit. So the bottleneck shifts from bank conflicted code to the synchronization code, right? So therefore you will not see that heavy duty programs which are less data parallel will not worry too much about the bank conflict. They will worry more about, let's say, synchronization.
Sir,
Okay.
so it's, when we say that it's useful for co-leased access, then can we safely say that there are 32 banks or something like that?
Yes, so that is correct. So there are at least 32 banks, and therefore you should be able to. That is correct. So that's a good observation.
Okay.
Can we say that bank conflicts lead to thread divergence? No. If at all, you could possibly say that it leads to some sort of memory uncoalescing. Right? This is not really thread divergence. It's more like the memory accesses are going to get into sequential processing because banks are storing the data. Yeah, at max you can talk about maybe the memory access is going to get like little uncoalesced, but that's not the technically accurate term. But yeah, I understand what you are trying to say, that bank conflicts are going to lead to some sort of sequentiality.
Regarding the exception,
Uh-huh.
warp access to the same word are not sequence. Is it because of we are going for the lock step? Because there is lock step, we are guaranteed that there will be a no op in case one thread reads there is a write in at least one thread. The other
Uh,
threads will wait, not wait. They will go for the no op, and hence the one will not read, the other will not write. So data race won't be there. Is it because of that?
Not really, not really. So what can happen, I'll tell you. So you can have a code in which two different threads from the same warp, one of them might be writing to the memory location, other might be reading to the same memory location, right? But that will definitely not happen at the same time. So but both of them might decide to write to the same memory location, right? And then there will be a conflict meaning then there will be a data race. So if I say if I have a statement like a of 0 equal to id, right? A of 0 is fixed location, right? And all the warp threads are writing to that a of 0. What will be the answer to this? It will be some number between 0 and 31, but we can't guarantee which one it is. But there is a data race. So it's not that only because warp threads are involved, therefore there won't be a data race. There will be a data race also, even if they are executing in SIMD fashion. This is more related to how the memory is getting retrieved from the banks. So that's more like, I would say, technology in which the banks are designed. And yeah, so I think it's a little different from warp threads accessing, I mean, executing the same memory location. Okay. All right. So let's look at maybe pictorially how it looks like. Okay, but I'll just show you. So if I have a nice access like this, thread idx dot x equal to this, then my there is no bank conflict in this case because consecutive words are going to different banks. In contrast, if I have strided access where the stride is, let's say 32 or so, then there is no guarantee that there will be no bank conflict. It all depends upon how many banks you have. Right? So in this case, I am assuming that there are 32 banks, and therefore the 32nd access is going to again come back to the 0th bank, and therefore there will be a conflict. If you have probably enough number of banks, then that is again this number will have to increase, but I suppose you get the idea that if you have a larger value, then you will get into bank conflicts. Okay, so this is stored in a round robin manner, right? So you have this certain number of banks, the words are going to get stored in a round robin manner sequentially or consecutive words going to get stored in consecutive banks, and then at some point in time it is going to come back to bank 0 and again get stored and so on. So that is how the storage is going to be. So this is one way in which you will be able to see if you get different performance when you have a slightly different access pattern. In this case, the stride goes on increasing, and you can try plotting. X-axis is the stride, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, like that, and y-axis is the time required, and you run this particular bank conflict code maybe in a loop several number of times, and then time it using your get time of day or other functions. By the way, those functions are also there in the course that are made available on the course webpage. So you should definitely try out these different ways. And since the accesses are very nicely parallel, you will get into these conflicts, and then you will see the performance difference beyond a point. And you will be able to make the access such that all the thread accesses are actually going to the same bank but different words. So that way also it's possible. Okay, so the pictorially it looks like this. So if you have, let me see if there are any questions. Okay, there are some questions. We'll come back to this diagram a little later. Different warps accessing adjacent elements of the same bank can happen simultaneously. No. Adjacent elements of the same bank. No. Even from the same warp, if you are accessing different words of the same bank, that also gets sequential. Right? So from across warps, getting access to the same bank but different words, or even same word from different warps, that is also going to be sequential. How is this exception handled in hardware? If we do not want sequentialization, then all the threads access the word in parallel. Does that mean each bank has 32 parallel buses? Okay, I'm not very sure how these banks are organized in hardware. Why would, okay, so no, I don't think that there will be 32 buses for each bank. In fact, I would believe that there is going to be probably only one bus for the bank, and that is the reason why this happens. It's just that the accumulator, the ALU might be getting this value and then distributing it to the warps, right, when you have the single word, and therefore that bus is probably going to create a conflict. It is like scanning the bank. Scanning the bank. Yeah, when you have multiple words, then it turns out to be like scanning the bank. But yeah, I didn't really probably understand that question very well. What is the bank size, as it seems to hamper parallelism? So the number of words inside the bank, that can be arbitrary. I mean, there must be some technology which is fixing the size of each bank. Yeah, I don't know exactly what is the size of the bank. I don't know if it is going to be fixed. I mean, according to some technology, it is going to be fixed, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know what is going to be the exact size of. But there will be multiple words which are stored inside the bank, right? So that much we can say. I would imagine that the number of banks is hampering parallelism more than the size of each bank. But if you are referring to this, that for a fixed size, for a fixed memory size, the number of banks multiplied by the bank size is affecting. So that way the bank size comes into picture. But yeah, the amount of parallelism is going to be decided by the number of banks. That's correct. And
So
there are going to be at least 32 banks available, since that we talked about the WAP. Yes, Venkat.
So just making sure that this bank organization is for the RAM, right? We're talking about the RAM, right?
No, no, no. We are talking about shared memory. We are
Shared.
only talking about shared memory.
Okay, so the RAM is not organized this way.
No, no, no. RAM has a different architecture. This we are talking about only shared memory. If I probably not make it clear, so
Okay.
the shared memory, and we are also having shared memory.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other concerns here? Okay, so let's look at that. So different ways in which the accesses might happen. So your words are, I mean, I'm showing only one word here, but that doesn't mean that there is only one word. There are probably many words inside each bank. So if these are nicely coalesced accesses like this, then there is no bank conflict in this case, right? So there is no bank conflict. In this case, it so happens that I am accessing from thread number 16 and thread number 0 the same bank and different words, and therefore this is called as there is a bank conflict, and this is called as a two-way bank conflict because there are two people accessing it. If it so happens that my access is a little different, right? So I have some complicated function using which I'm still accessing different banks, right? So in this case, it doesn't matter what my thread ID is. As long as warp threads are accessing different elements of these banks, and I'm just showing one warp, but you can have multiple warps accessing the same bank and so on, right? In which case also there will be a bank conflict. But in this case, if you just focus on one warp, with respect to that, there is no bank conflict. Any questions on this diagram? Okay, so I'm going to show you probably a few more pictures. Can you tell me which of these, maybe first, second, third, and you can tell me in which cases we will have bank conflicts? Okay, there are multiple answers. Second and third case, there will be bank conflict. Then Sai Chaitanya says none. Second, third, none. Second, third, none. Okay, so there seems to be a uniform answer that the first one will not have a bank conflict. And let's understand why. So again, there is a haphazard indexing and into the banks with respect to your thread ID. But since each bank is getting accessed by a single thread, therefore there is no bank conflict whatsoever. So there is no bank conflict here. Let's see what happens in this case. So here there is access to the same bank, bank number 5, but it so happens that it is, okay, so I'm showing it as a single red rectangle, in which case it means that there is a single word that is being accessed by these warp threads, right? And therefore there won't be any bank conflict. This is our exception case. If you recall, on the previous slide, we had multiple such rectangles shown, which means that they are accessing different words of the same bank, right? So in this case, it is going to be, again, no bank conflict in the second case. In the third case also is similar, where there are large number of threads which are accessing the same word from the same bank, and therefore there is no bank conflict. Does that seem reasonable? Any questions on this one? Okay. All right. So we'll move ahead from bank conflict. There are two. So like we talked about global memory, then we talked about shared memory. There are two more memories which we said in the initial slides, which are there, which are not so often used, but nonetheless, some applications do use it, and especially in the graphics part, you might be able to make use of them because the storage size is little limited. So that is texture memory and the constant memory, and we are going to look at those two with respect to how we access them, etc. So the texture memory is kind of fast read-only memory. Right? Read-only doesn't mean that you can't write to it. It just means that from the kernel you are not able to write it. You will define it definitely. So you have an array to which you map a texture, which means that the array is going to get copied into the texture. That means in a particular array format, and then that is going to get utilized for your purpose, especially when you have 2D spatial accesses. Right? So when I'm going from one point to its neighboring points in the 2D plane, then for that the texture is very useful, or texture memory is very useful. Right? So I have this, so I define a texture to be of this type texture. It's a template which has this float. 2 is the number of dimensions, and read mode element type is that I'm going to read it in the kernel, and this is the variable name. Right? And then I'm going to take this variable and map it to some array which I have defined using CUDA-malloc. As soon as I map it, this memory that is there in the array is going to get mapped to this texture in a particular format. And the expectation is that I'm going to access this CUDA array as a matrix, and therefore mapping it to the texture makes me access it little more, let's say, in a performance friendly manner. Right? Otherwise, we have this row major access where if I have a matrix, if I go to the second row from first row, then I lose the effects of locality. But if I don't want to do that, I can put it into a texture which has a nice 2D access pattern. And inside the kernel, I can use a function like this to access a particular element of this texture. And I'm going to show you the code on the next slide. So this example from CUDA SDK, what it is doing is that it takes an image and then transforms each pixel of this image into a different location. So I have a source image, then I have a output image. And then from that source image, I'm going to map the elements, in which case I'm going to rotate the image in a particular manner. So how does one do a rotation? That is defined by this theta, which is the angle by which I rotate. And there is some functionality which I think some of you will understand much better than me, but I leave it at that. It's some computation which is making sure that I'm going to map the existing XY coordinate in the image to a new XY coordinate in the texture, in the new array. So that is defined by the texture elements. And how am I going to access that particular texture element is going to be, I have this text which I had defined inside the, so this needs to be defined globally, by the way. So this texture is defined globally, and I'm going to map the X and Y from this texture and store it using X and Y in my output array. So that is given by a particular thread ID. So the input image is getting mapped to the texture, and from that the texture is going to get modified, and then the texture is not getting modified, but the texture is going to be getting rotated and stored inside the output vector. Okay, so that is what this is doing. If we take a particular example, and this is a common example from graphics applications, that if you have this model's image, that is going to get rotated like this after we perform this transform kernel execution. So apart from this mapping of U and V, if there are any questions on the texture, I can take those up because I don't understand this cos theta and sin theta very well. There is a question. There is no conflict here because all the threads are from same warp. On the previous slide, Yes, that is correct. Only because they are from the same verb, there is no conflict. If there would have been from multiple verbs, then there would have been a conflict, even if it is to the same word in the same bank. That is correct. Okay, so yeah, so I think I didn't mention that, but yeah, this code is available again on the website. So this where is that? Yeah, this variable text, right, which I have specified probably in the specified in the global header part, right, which means that outside all the functions above the kernel, above main, you specify this as a global variable so that it will be accessible to both the main, which is using this variable, as well as inside the kernel. So this is kind of a little exception to our regular variables, which are accessible either on the GPU or on the CPU. So there are variables which you can define even globally, but accessible only on the GPU, right? So we'll study that. But this is definitely one exception which is accessible in both. Just that it is writable from the CPU and readable from the GPU. The second memory that we know of is the constant memory. Again, both of these are a few KB of memories, and these are not writable from the kernel, and therefore these get utilized a little less compared to the shared memory, which shared memory is both read and write. So this is around 64 KB per SM, and you can specify any variable just by adding this underscore underscore constant underscore underscore. And for copying this information to the GPU, we again use a variant of CUDA memcopy. It's used as CUDA memcopy to symbol. So this is your host memory, which is having some data, and I'm writing that to this constant memory from the CPU. So it's writable from the CPU. But when I access it from the GPU, it cannot be written to. It has to be read. But the access of this is going to be faster than global memory, as well as to some extent shared memory. Because the shared memory, this particular, although shared memory is also cached, but that is read write, so there might be invalidations which are happening from the threads. Whereas this memory is constant memory, so it can just cache it and not invalidate. Right? So it's never going to get invalidated. So that is one big advantage of constant memory as well as texture memory. And we might be able to make use of this in our applications to improve the performance. So this is how the overall code looks like. Again, this is defined globally, and I'm going to access meta of 0, which is because I have defined this to be an array of 1 size, and yeah, so I'm storing the value 10 to meta, and I'm just accessing it here. So why I have named it to be meta is because if I have certain metadata, a small amount of it, I can just push it to constant memory, and I don't want to update it. It's a constant data. Then I can make use of it in my codes. Right? The rest of the kernel code remains the same. It's just that you have to define it here globally, then do a CUDA memcopy to symbol, and then start accessing it the way it is in the GPU. Right? Any of the kernels will have access to it, even inside the print and so on.
Sir?
Yeah, Venkat.
Sir, I just wanted to know if the texture and constant memory, they are both on the same level as in the memory hierarchy. Are they one level below the shared memory or on the same level as shared memory? I'm guessing because of they'll be using cache. Is that correct?
Yeah, so texture and constant memory are actually at the level of DRAM. They are actually at the level of global memory, but they also get cached in constant memory and the texture, constant cache and texture cache. And therefore, so they have an appropriate level at the L1 level. And but as far as texture and constant memory are concerned, those are defined at the global memory.
So they have their own separate cache, and
Yeah,
like
they have a small, yes, correct. So they have a small cache which is helpful for getting performance. So you should view them more like at the L1 at the level of L1 itself.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Oh, we have exceeded the time. Okay, we'll worry about this compute capability maybe in the next class. If there are any quick questions, we can take those up now.
Sir, here instead of
Yeah,
array can be
Kushal?
defined as a constant, so like a variable, single variable, instead of an array.
Sorry, I didn't get that. What of array of what?
Instead of meta brackets 1, can we define it simply as meta? Is it possible to define it that way?
Yes, so like we defined in the previous slide, it is possible to define it that way. I just defined it that way because you can extend it, let's say more number of meta variables available, so that from multiple threads you will be able to access and so on. But yeah, you can define it as a single variable.
Like, is it possible to extend it? Like you said, if we like if we keep meta 2, we should change it in the program rather than during runtime we can't change
Sorry,
the.
your voice is breaking. Sorry, Kushal, yeah, go ahead.
So can we extend meta like meta? Can we keep it as a variable length array?
I'm sorry, yeah, your voice is
I'll take.
breaking. Yeah, sorry. I think there was an issue. Can we keep meta as a variable sized array? No. You have to have meta as a fixed size array. You have to have meta as a fixed size array. Yes. In fact, you are defining it globally, so you cannot make it an arbitrary sized array. How to assign numbers to meta if it has size greater than 1? Meaning, so you can write an array completely, right, using CUDA memcopy to symbol. Just give that much size here and it will copy all the elements there. Alternatively, you can do a CUDA memcopy to symbol 1 by 1 also. That is also okay. Right? So yeah, you can do a CUDA memcopy to symbol for multiple elements, not a problem. Can we keep it as a variable size array? No, that is not possible. Any other questions? All right, so we'll stop here and we'll discuss further in our next class.